Hello, you wild and wondrous beasts of YouTube and the internet in general. Brandon Valentine here, and I'm here today to talk to you about an age-old question that guitarists and musicians alike ask themselves. Does musical theory matter? Now, I'm sure we've all heard the old sayings and the old adages.
Classical musicians have no feel.
Now, when it comes to listening to music, I can confidently tell you it does not matter. You should not be holding other musicians up to a bar saying you must be this experimental or this expressive with chord voicings to enter, because you're going to be cutting off huge swaths of brilliant music that's main intent is to move you. The purpose of that music isn't there to appease you on some academic level. There is a lot of brilliant and wonderful music that is simply designed to move you on a visceral level. And the music theory side of this, you can throw out the window because that's not important at that time. There are flourishes, little nuances that can come in that are really benefited from music theory and from you understanding music theory as a listener and the writer understanding music theory as a composer. But the core of it all is going to be, does it move you? Of course, that's the core of it all. Go to a good AC/DC song. They're not thinking too hard about theory, they're just writing some awesome songs. Now, I can only talk about my experience as a musician. I can't vouch for yours, or I don't know yours. But I can only say for myself that getting a grip on theory has opened up doors in my writing, in my playing, in my understanding, in the way I listen to music. Now, of course, it goes without saying that there are a huge swath of amazing players who have never had any training in theory whatsoever in their life. And of course, there are a huge amount of musicians who have had training in classical theory and jazz theory or something, but don't have any feel. But that is not because they have or haven't had training. Trust me, I know. I was a 16-year-old metalhead who was ragging on anyone who had a better knowledge of music than I did. One of the single biggest regrets that I have with my journey with guitar is that I didn't dive into theory way earlier. You see, music theory isn't just reading music and sitting in an orchestra pit with a million other musicians, or being a freakish set musician that rocks up and sight reads for something they've never played before. That's not what music theory is just reserved for. It is the language that enables us to unlock a lot of really bizarre and interesting secrets with our playing, and particularly with our songwriting. You may be sitting there as someone who doesn't know theory and using really basic chords and kind of basic chord structures, whereas if you had a bit more of an in-depth knowledge of music theory, you may find yourself unlocking some really interesting chord voices, jazzy style chords like a 13th or the tritone laden diminished 7th. These chords have unique voices that'll elicit really explicit responses. Having a half-decent grip on music theory as a lead guitarist in particular grants you access to these blue notes that are in between the scale. Notes that might seem a little bit awkward or have a bizarre inflection and don't belong in the rest of the scale, but have a relationship to the chord that is playing at current and can act as a really interesting emphasis. Now, that being said, does music theory make you a better player and a better songwriter? Not necessarily. But a really good way to look at this is, would you rather an author or a poet know the dictionary back to front? Because above all else, music theory is a language. A language that is designed to get an idea in your head into the head of your fellow musicians. And you will save so much time and be able to transfer these ideas more accurately if you're both speaking that same language. In the past, at times where I have not known as much theory as I know now, I've had other musicians that have asked me, quickly, can you just do it this way? Not necessarily handing me sheet music, but they would be asking me on the fly, oh, you know that part we just did? So straight after that, we're going to go up a fourth, or we're going to diminish this, or we're going to do that in a this time feel. Now, I was caught a little bit behind in these moments. When you don't speak that language and everyone else in the room does, it makes it a little more difficult. Now, how much theory do you really need to know? A good question. Not everyone needs to be Adam Neely. he has a very intense grip on music theory, and if you enjoy that idea and want to delve very deep into music theory, I highly suggest going to watch his channel. It's amazing. It's brilliant content. But his knowledge of theory goes beyond a simple understanding of scales and chord structures and voicings into the realm of damn near astrophysiological dark matter of jazz. But I can honestly, very confidently say that everyone's career as a musician and everyone's experience as a musician is going to be vastly improved by a basic knowledge of theory. This doesn't mean that you need to go into such extremes that you are a classically trained, sight-reading jazz beast, but as a guitarist, especially if you've got a second guitarist in the band to work with, you want to be able to describe your ideas to them, particularly when it comes to working together, like something like harmonies. We're all used to the 80s metal Iron Maiden style minor third, just 3 notes up in the minor scale for the riff that you're playing. But there are a lot of really interesting other harmonies that can be explored, and theory will help you unlock them, or at least help you understand them, and definitely help you communicate them to your fellow guitarist. Take a band like Mastodon, for instance, who frequently use the fifth. Now, they may or may not have stumbled across this via knowing theory. I have no idea about their journey in that way. But you, as someone playing their songs, can be greatly benefited by immediately knowing what that is and being able to describe it to someone else, and being able to really infuse it into your writing and how you produce songs in the future. Now, this brings me to another point. You'll be able to look at a part that another musician is playing and go, I like that use of harmonic minor, or I like how that's being implemented in that setting. You're going to be able to analyze it as a set of relationships between the notes. So when it comes time to putting that into your own playing and your own style, instead of just simply copying what they're doing, you'll have the ability to go, oh, that's a certain relationship between the notes, or a relationship between the chord and the type of voicing you're using, or especially a relationship between what you're playing and the time. Which brings me yet to another point, timing. Now, I love 4/4, everyone does. It's catchy, it's brilliant, but there comes a time where many musicians want to be able to express something that isn't just
1, 2, 3, 4.
And you want to go out into the realm of odd time measures like 7/4, or God forbid, something like 13/12. Jazz. And delving a bit further into theory will really open this up for you a lot more. Knowing a little bit of music theory also allows you to listen to music differently. This comes with both positives and negatives. An interesting video that I recommend you watch, and in fact the video that inspired me to make this video, is from Anthony Fantano of course, The Needle Drop. As a music reviewer and a musician, he has a really interesting idea and a really interesting experience with his application of music theory to his reviews. A definite positive of it is that you'll be listening to bands like Animals as Leaders or people like Steven Wilson, and you'll pick up on a lot more of the nuances that they're trying to pass through to you. Like I said, music theory is a language in which one musician is trying to convey something to the other. Obviously, there are certain styles of music that lend themselves more to musical theory than others. Obviously, first one that comes to mind is jazz, and then things like prog and more experimental metal. Now, as guitarists, we all know the types of theory that have seeped into the common knowledge of guitarists. Power chords, pentatonic scale, open chords, blues scale. These things are everywhere in the world of guitar, but this is only a tiny percentage of what you can actually squeeze out of guitar. And I've talked about this a little bit in other videos where there are traps for metal musicians and rock musicians that are kind of easy and satisfying. A power chord, a first, a fifth, and the octave. Very tonally simple, very tonally shallow, sounds good with gain, nothing too muddy, but it's satisfying, hits, it works. But it's a bit of a trap, and the nuances you can squeeze out of a different chord other to a power chord in that state are vast. You play a classic kind of power chord progression, something like D, C, A sharp, C, D. And you play yourself a D pentatonic or a D blues over it, and you've got yourself a good old-fashioned little bit of a rock song. But like I said before, having a good grip on theory will allow you to open new tonal options into a realm where you're using interesting chord voicings and a lead part that may only apply to that individual chord you're playing and not the next, allowing you to have some interesting shifts and ebbs and flows. And as guitarists, particularly modern guitarists, people who are messing around with rock, pop, punk, metal, gent, prog, new psychedelia, stoner metal, you don't need to be Captain Theory Monster. But I will always recommend that you get as deep into theory as you can for the explicit purpose that it will unlock tonal doors for you. And I think that you should view theory differently. There has to be a bit of a change of mindset. You shouldn't view theory as this cold and uncaring thing, but instead view it as a thesaurus for poetry and storytelling. Now, that might sound very fluffy and peace and love, but the fact is that you will be able to draw upon a greater well of storytelling tools. There you go, everybody, and I hope you enjoyed, and I hope that you really do go out there and learn at least a little bit of theory and whet your appetite and see how far you can go, because it is an interesting and wonderful and expressive world out there. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to click and give a like and subscribe and hang around and watch me rant about more things on the reg. Cause I'm angry, I got lots of shit to say. That's the internet. Isn't everybody angry? Brandon Valentine here. I'll catch you guys next time.